Well, welcome to Inflow Communications monthly administration training. Today's session will cover ShoreTel's Enterprise Contact Center. And you'll notice here in the splash screen, don't miss next month's webinar, which is May 17 at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can register for the webinar at inflowcommunications.com. Now at Inflow Communications, we love taking time to educate our customers and friends of Inflow about the products, and we do a monthly web session. Each month is dedicated to a different topic, and we actually alternate between administration training on the Pbx, the ShoreTel Pbx, and then on the even months, we actually do Enterprise Contact Center. This is our second session, and today's session is focused on Enterprise Contact Center admin training, and more specifically, we're going to be going into Ivr Fundamentals. So let's get this rolling here. Who is Inflow Communications? On board with us today as moderator and monitor of the session, we have Nick Montrand. He's the Client Services Supervisor. His experience is 15 plus years of networking and system administration. So Nick will be monitoring your interactions in your screen on the right-hand side. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please present those in the chat window, and we will definitely stop and pause for questions. So Nick, do you want to say hi?
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, good morning, Nick, and thanks for hosting today. We appreciate it. And my name is Chris Riccio. For those of you that I have not met, I'm sure I've met many of you for our Inflow clients. I'm the Director of Contact Center and Advanced Applications. My experience spans over 20 years in contact center consultation design. I'm kind of a technical guy with also a user interface perspective. Everything I've ever done technically has always been involved with the contact center. I come to Inflow Communications by way of ShoreTel. I worked for ShoreTel for 3 years and was happy to bridge my skills with Inflow Communications, and I think together it's a great fit. So who is at Inflow Communications? We'll add a little bit more flavor to that. Inflow Communications has landed on Oregon's top 100 list of fastest growing private companies 2 years in a row now. Also under the ShoreTel umbrella, we are the ShoreTel Contact Center Partner of the Year for 2015. That was an honor given to us last year at our partner conference event with ShoreTel. Also, with ShoreTel, we are listed as the top 3 in the ShoreTel Circle of Excellence. This is an award that ShoreTel acknowledges their top performing partners, and we were in the top 3. Across the globe, we have over 400 customers worldwide with over 70,000 endpoints. It's something we live and breathe, and we love working with clients, and that's kind of one of our claims to fame, is great customer service. We do have offices and employees in Oregon, Washington, California, Texas, and Florida. We are global, and we have a national footprint. And we have, and this number has slightly changed recently, over 25 skilled professionals and technicians. And if I can say there's one thing about Inflow Communications, we're flatly focused on customer satisfaction and education. From my personal experience, having been a customer previously, working with a vendor that actually provides great direct contact and education is always helpful. Down below, you can see the logo of some of our clients that we work with, Beaverton School District, Papa Murphy's, the Better Business Bureau. This is just a smattering of some of our clients. Obviously, we have many more. So that's who Inflow Communications is from a high-level point of view. Now today, our web administration training session is going to be focused on ShoreTel's Enterprise Contact Center. This is coming from the point of administration, and we're going to cover Ivr Fundamentals. Now I will say today's topic, to distill Ivr down into an hour, there's quite a bit of content. So what I've attempted to do is put together a process that takes us through the many different options that I'm going to talk about, and it'll culminate and terminate with my actually configuring an Ivr flow process using the fundamentals that I'm going to outline here. Because today's topic is dense and there's likely going to be a lot of questions, I will stop for questions as we transition from one piece to the next. But if the questions that you have pop into your mind after our session, please send an email to training@inflowcommunications.com, where I'll be happy to coordinate a one-on-one session via telephone or web session to go into more detail about a topic that you had questions about. And I suspect there may be a couple of options here as I go through the flow process. Again, feel free to add any questions in the right-hand side, and I'll stop and ask Nick to see if there's any questions as we go through the presentation. So speaking of IVR fundamentals, I put together a brief agenda for us. First, we're going to cover what is IVR, what does it do. We're going to look at basic features and functionality, the most commonly used features, and I think it's really important to understand what IVR does not include. I think it's always important to point out where the cliff is, if you will, but we'll definitely uncover some good pieces of information today. Now, if you've sat in one of my sessions previously, call profiles is a concept that is available in ShoreTel's Enterprise Contact Center, and you can think of a call profile as a data flag or a label. I'm going to review this again. It may be repeat if you've been on a previous session, but we won't go into a lot of detail. I think we just want to have a refresher to understand conceptually what a call profile is. Next, we're going to show you some things that you will not find in the manual. It's been my experience as a user of technology that users tend to learn things about products that are not codified into a manual. And this goes with any product. This is not intrinsic to ShoreTel's Enterprise Contact Center, but I actually want to share with you some things that I've found that when you're considering configuring IVR, having this information ahead of time will probably save you lots of time. So we'll cover some topics that you won't find in the manual. And lastly, at the end of today's session, I'm going to do a live demonstration where we're going to cover a basic configuration. What I will configure is a basic menu. I'll show how we play a file, and we're going to change a call's priority. These are the most common things that clients like to better understand when they're thinking about IVR. When I get into the live demo, this is actually what we're going to do, and I'm going to come back to this slide in about a few more moments. We're going to do a basic call flow. In my call flow, I'm going to give you a menu of 3 options. Press 1 for customer service, 2 for tech support, and 3 for sales. Part of that process and configuration is we're going to do some preliminary setup work through a database connection. I'm going to explain call profiles, and we're going to talk about something called an Ivr application. Now, I'm not speaking about IVR as a software application. I'm talking about IVR as the ability to create an internal application that simply lets me count how many callers press 1, press 2, or press 3. It's an often misunderstood application, so I want to point it out today. On the right-hand side, we're going to look at changing a call profile data. If that doesn't make sense right now, it will momentarily. We're going to look at changing a call's priority, callback in queue. I'm going to make some comments about how you use the callback in queue widget. I'm going to do a database lookup, and this is what's going to actually take us into things you will not find in the manual. Now the next bullet where it says %Annie versus %calling. This goes back to call profiles. It won't make sense right now. I won't go into detail at the moment, so it'll make sense in a few moments. And lastly, I'm going to show you something that you can do that's not written anywhere, and if you can think logically, you can actually do things that aren't really built into the system, such as alphanumeric readback. Now that's a lot of detail we're going to cover, so let's kind of jump right in. So let's talk about what is IVR and what does it do. So IVR is an automated process to either route calls, allow a user to interact with an application, and more. Most people historically have thought of IVR as a process when you call your bank and you enter your account information, and then the system magically reads back your account balance, your next due date, things of that nature. So that's traditionally how IVR has been thought of. However, with ShoreTel's IVR, there's a lot more features involved, and IVR actually does a lot of the heavy lifting in the ACD process. So it does many more things than look up account information. Primarily, IVR is used as an auto-attendant feature to offer a menu of options. Now, when I say auto-attendant, most people think of Pbx, but IVR can absolutely be configured to be your auto-attendant. We use auto-attendant and IVR to make call routing decisions. So if I do press 1, 2, or 3, I know where to route that call. We can also use IVR to set a call's priority. So for example, if I think tech support calls should be handled ahead of customer service calls, I can give them another priority, and that's what I'll show you a little bit later. IVR is also used for playing messages in queue. This is pretty important because oftentimes when you think of queuing, a system will have the ability to play messages in queue, but oftentimes in ACD you want to extend that capability. Because IVR is directly connected to the ACD, they intermingle very seamlessly, and this is where you can use it to play music, messages in queue, and more importantly, those messages can be dynamic, meaning they can change based on information found in a database or the type of caller, meaning customer service will hear something completely different than tech support. It can connect to a database. This happens to be one of the greatest features I think is available in the ShoreTel ECC IVR. Connecting to a database anymore these days, in my opinion, should be out of the box and easy to navigate. And lastly, IVR is often used and primarily used for Dtmf, which is the ability to enter information on a keypad so you can make a menu choice, enter account information, or enter any digit or process to make a routing decision. Now, there are a lot of other uses within ShoreTel's IVR. And onto the right side, you'll see a list of the toolbox and the widgets available. And here are some of the other options you can use IVR for. You can have it set up to log agents or allow agents to log in and out of primary groups. So there are some contact center environments where they do not want a desktop interface, but they want the agent to be able to reach for their phone, dial some digits, and log in. So there is actually a tool for that. Now here's where we talk about Ivr Applications. Inside the IVR, you can create small widgets or applications that will track how many callers pressed option 1, option 2, etc. This is sort of an misunderstood option in ShoreTel's Contact Center, but it's worth its weight in gold when you're trying to navigate IVR, which it is usually not depicted on a desktop screen while it's happening in real time. It does give you the ability to peer inside IVR and see what's actually happening. IVR is also used for callbacks. That could be a callback in queue. It could be a scheduled callback or abandoned callbacks. I point this out because oftentimes when the system is configured to do a callback, you may want to use IVR to look up information about that caller so that when the agent connects to the individual, they know who they're speaking with and the reason they might have called previously. IVR is also used for doing outbound dials. The outbound dial can be part of a dial list for an outbound campaign. It can also be an agentless process where we simply just leave automated messages, or you can have it interact with an agent. It gives you a little bit of both options. So IVR is used for that. You can use IVR to create and handle surveys, also part of outbound dialing. It also is used for sending messages to folks that might be using a multimedia channel such as web chat. So if someone's waiting in queue in a web chat, IVR can send them messages intermittently. And lastly, IVR has a built-in capability to read dates, times, money, and numbers, and it can read information from a database as it relates to date, time, money, and numbers. So it's fairly flexible, lots of options available in IVR, and because there are so many available features, I wanted to point out what I find are the most valuable features in IVR to kind of distill it down, because I've just thrown a lot of information at you. These are the 4 pieces I find the most helpful. Number 1, the tool is a drag and drop configuration tool. You'll see me configure that towards the end of our session today. 90% of the tool is drag and drop. There are pieces that need to be filled in, but it's set up so that it's easy to figure out which pieces need to be addressed or configured. Connecting to a database is native to ShoreTel's IVR. This is a huge win because many contact center offerings in IVR that when you want to connect to a database requires an inordinate amount of professional services. ShoreTel has it out of the box. Contact center, I kind of jokingly say you can point and click your way to happiness. It's really that easy, and I'm going to show you how we connect to an IVR. It is an out-of-the-box feature. And the ability to create user-specific call profiles, this will make sense in a moment. This simply allows me to custom define the information that is associated with a call. I'm going to point this out in the next couple of slides. And lastly, I like it because it uses very basic, simple logic, meaning, is the value true or false, or is the answer yes or no? Because I have a database connector and I can look at the information I might be receiving from the database and I can say, is it true or false? I can almost do anything with IVR so long as I am logical and be smarter than the system. I'm going to show you a couple things today. So lastly, I want to point out what IVR does not do, just so you really understand where you might need additional help. IVR does not process payments natively. Most IVRs do not. It requires that you have a merchant services account and a merchant services process to navigate, which usually involves a level of web services, unless the application has a server on site that is localized. It does not provide built-in web services processing. Now, there is a web services plugin that I like to use, but out of the box, it does not exist. There is a DLL component, but I find the DLL component requires customization, and the downside is that I don't get to see the elements of the DLL. In other words, if I must use a tool, I want to at least see what the tool is asking me. Is it asking for an account number, and is it going to give me back an account balance? That's really important. But IVR does not contain a web services process out of the box. It also does not provide speech recognition. It also does not do text-to-speech. If you're not familiar with text-to-speech, let's say, for example, my customer is Christopher Riccio, me. If I enter my account number, it could not read back, your name is Christopher Riccio. That requires a customization. Although it can be done, it is not built in natively. IVR is also not agent aware, meaning oftentimes clients want a call to be sent to an agent. And before it's sent to the agent, they want IVR to first see if the agent is available. This is what I mean, but that it's not agent aware. It is also not group aware. You can't give it a condition that says if the group is everyone's busy in that group, send the call somewhere else. However, with web services plugin, you could navigate both of these. So these are the most common things that people ask, and I'm just pointing out here that IVR does not contain these options. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible, and anything possible usually involves a level of professional services and money, of course. So at this point, Nick, I'll see if there are any questions. I know we're early on, but I want to get this out of the way. If there's any questions at this point.
Yeah, our first question is from Peter. What is an abandoned callback?
An abandoned callback is if a customer calls into a service queue, and typically when a customer is waiting in queue and they get impatient, and let's say the wait time is over 90 seconds, and the customer says, I don't have time to wait in queue, and I hang up. That's considered abandoned call. The customer hung up before an agent was able to grab their call. An abandoned callback is the system can be figured to recognize as soon as somebody hangs up that was not attended to by an agent, we will automatically call them back. All right, so I want to talk about the basic call flow process. I think it's important from the IVR.
Chris, we've got one more question for you.
Sure, what's the question?
What version of ECC are we going to be covering the features of?
This is version 9, and it's post GA6. So there's a couple of things that occurred in GA6 I think will be important to know.
And then last thing for you, if you want to check which screen, I'm seeing your preview page as well.
Oh, that's fine. I have okay. 2 large monitors, so I'm okay with the preview. No secrets here, so thank you for pointing that out. All right, so hopefully that answers the questions. Keep them coming. I'm happy to address any questions. And again, if we run a little short on time, remember you can send the questions to training@inflowcommunications.com. So let's talk about the basic call flow process. This is really going to address how the pieces fit together so that you have an idea of the flow process and where you can actually use IVR. So the basic flow process, when a caller calls in, the first place that call hits is going to be a ShoreTel switch. And in that switch will be a route point. A route point simply tells the call or controls the call where it goes next. Now, the switch, when a call is bound for the contact center, is then going to, in turn, take that call and say, hey, this is for the contact center. I'm going to go to Enterprise Contact Center IRN. An IRN is an intelligent routing number. This is the same thing as a route point. On the PBX, you will have a route point with a number. On ECC, you will have an IRN with the identical number. That's how they know each other. They use the same naming convention, but for all intents and purposes, you won't really see the label route point in ECC, but you will see IRN. They are one and the same. Now, once the call gets to ECC, the IRN will have a destination. Typically, when you're thinking of a call going into a contact center queue, the destination is a group. Well, in ShoreTel's vernacular, in order to get to group, you actually hit a service. Now, the service knows about the group, but here's the distinction. The service is actually where the call gets queued. The service knows you want to go to customer service, but it won't relieve that call or release that call to customer service until it sees that an agent is available. Because the point is, we don't want to release that call to a group waiting for an agent when after 30 seconds, if there's nobody available in the primary group, we can actually look at a secondary group simultaneously. So the service usually has the group destination, and in my example, it's customer service. So where does IVR fit in this process? The first place is an IRN destination can be pointed to a script, and 95% of clients will point their IRN to a script. Why? Because the IVR will ask for an account number or look up information about the user. So it's to your advantage to send the destination of the IRN to a script first, which can do things such as play messages, greeting messages. If you have any legalese, such as mini Mirandas, your call may be recorded and monitored for quality purposes. IVR does that. So rather than sending the IRN directly to the group, it's to your advantage to send it to the IRN, the IVR, and the IVR then can send it to the service. Then that's the next place you would use IVR, is at the service level. So inside that process there, this is where IVR is commonly used for playing messages while holding in queue, offering callbacks while holding in queue. So these are the two places that you will commonly find where IVR is positioned. So I wanted you to have a general flow process. The IVR doesn't extend to the PBX. It's solely behind the server and part of the server in ECC. So let's talk about one of the key fundamentals of IVR, which I think if you were to spend any time understanding one feature, I would recommend understanding how a call profile can be used. What is a call profile? Really get to know this feature. Simply put, think of it as a label or a flag. And I'm going to point out that call profiles come in various pieces of information. To make it simple, it's just information about the call. Now, a call profile is information associated with the call, such as what time did the call come in, what's the length of the call currently, what's the caller ID of the person calling. So there's a lot of information about the call which is generated by the system. So as soon as the customer calls the switch and it hits ECC, we want that relevant information for a couple of reasons. For reporting, but also with IVR, we can do it and use it for other purposes. Now you'll notice the call profile, when you look at configurable options in IVR, it's always represented with a % in front of it and whatever name you happen to give it. I'll break that out in a moment, but let's talk about call profiles. The system has what are known as mandatory call profiles. These are system-generated pieces of information. They already exist in the contact center, such as Annie, which is the caller ID, the time the call entered the ACD, the callback destination if they're doing a callback in queue. So there's lots of information generated by a contact center that already exists as part of the call. Now here's the best part. You can create user-specific call profiles based on your environment, and they can be named anything. So let me give you an example. In banking, or let's say credit unions have member IDs. So you might want to create a call profile called member ID, so that when the client calls in, they enter on their keypad their member ID. If you're an insurance company, you might want to use a policy ID, because it would make no sense to have a member ID in insurance, but policy ID makes sense. If you're healthcare, you might have your primary care physician's ID. So my point here is that because I can create these custom pieces or buckets or flags, I can do things very specific to my environment. So make it simple, it's a label or a flag. I'm going to show that to you in a moment. To break it out in simple terms, in ECC indicator, you'll notice on the right-hand side of my screen in that red rectangle, the very first digits you see on the top one where it says 654321, that's the account number. That's a custom call profile. And next to that is $98.14. That's the account balance. But the rest of the information comes from the system. There's the caller ID. There's 1-562-435-3484, time of call, etc. Down at the bottom in the lower right-hand side, you know, we affectionately talk about the toaster pop. So it's also embedded in the toaster pop. So these are system-generated call profiles. Keep in mind, what we're going to play with today is creating a custom call profile to use in a call flow. If you're using the desktop tools at the agent side, you also see that when I look at call profile information, whether it's system generated or not, it could be custom. When a call is in queue, I see the information. Now the rectangle on top is if I'm an agent on an active call, I will see it this way. If I'm a supervisor or an agent watching the queues, I can actually see all the callers and their specific information. You'll notice the account balance and account number are listed there too. So when I pass through IVR, I can collect this information and hold it while I'm in queue. So this has tremendous value when you're looking at calls in queue, but we also use the information for other purposes. So that's my overview on call profiles. I realize that's a quick hit. If you have questions about call profiles, use the email training@inflowcommunications.com and we can navigate a one-on-one call. Now I want to cover some things that you will not find in the manual. These are things that I learned, sometimes banging my head against the wall trying to figure things out, and this is common how you learn things. Trial and error is the best way to learn, but these are things that I think would save you a lot of time if I just tell them to you. So number one, we talked about call profiles. Remember, call profiles is information about the call as the call comes in. One of them is Annie. Annie is the caller ID of the calling party. There's also a call profile called call ID, which could sound like caller ID. It's a little bit different. And there's also one called calling. Who is calling? So while they're very similar, they're different. Now, admittedly, Annie and calling are the same thing. Who's calling? Show me the caller ID. But Annie is used differently when you're doing a database query. And I'm going to show that to you later. But these are one of the things that kind of segmenting out. In the center here, this call ID actually refers to the ID the system gave that call event. So if Sam Jones called at 12:05, there will be a system-generated call ID, but not the same thing. Now here's a new feature that was added in ECC 9 GA6. For the guys that are on the call that are technical and worked on the PBX side, there is something called a Pbx Deenis Map. This is usually where you map your DIDs with a logical name or an 800 number with a logical name. For those of you that might not know, if my 800 number was 1-800-555-1000, typically you'll see the number 1000 from the carrier. But in the phone system, you might want to show the full qualified 800 number. When you do that, the information that's configured on the PBX passes through to ECC as a call profile called Deenis name. I'm going to show that to you in a moment. That was a hidden gem that actually solves so many issues with reporting and gives you a little bit, actually a lot more control out of the system. Now there is a widget which is used for the callbacks. When you're using IVR to schedule callbacks, there is a widget that will collect the callback information. What is not specifically outlined about this is that if you want a callback in queue, you're going to use the same widget. You're just not going to fill out some information. So I want to point that out. There's also a widget called decision. Decision usually says yes or no. Is this yes or no? One of the things that I've seen users attempt to do is, well, my answer will always be yes, so just give me a yes condition. If it's yes, go here. But if you forget to configure the no condition, the system's going to say, well, I don't know what you want me to do. You've told me where to go and it's yes, but you haven't filled in the rest of the equation. So you need to fill out both sides, otherwise it'll always trigger false. Now when adding Odbc, this is connecting to a database. You must run it from the actual executable. You cannot use control panel. And you must right-click and run it as administrator upon initial setup. And I'll show that to you in a moment. And lastly, this is a fun one. You can actually use IVR to create alphanumeric readback. We had a customer who deals with automobile VIN IDs. And you know a VIN ID, if you have your registration, it could be XV17XP-LMNOZ, right? The system natively will not read back characters that are intermixed with numbers and alphabet, but you can do it. And I'll show you an example of that if we have enough time, but you can do things that are not really put in a manual. So those are some things that I've discovered that I can do. So let's talk about adding ODBC. When you want to add ODBC, if you're an admin on the call, most of the time you go to control panel. However, when you're adding it to ECC, you actually need to navigate to the executable, which is on the C drive, and I've highlighted it here in the rectangle on top. Go to the C drive, go to Windows, go to syswild64, look for the EXE, which is, I've marked on the right-hand side, odbcad32.exe. Right-click and run as administrator. That's kind of a hidden gem. If you don't run it as administrator, you could add it, but sometimes it doesn't show up and it becomes a permissions issue getting to the database. So save yourself some time and heartache and just do it this way. Once it's added, you'll test your configuration, and lastly, you will restart only the contact center service. Now you can do that through control panel. All right, that's one of the hidden gems. Now here's another one. Going back to the Deenis map on the Pbx. On the left, I've circled 3027. This is our 800 number. Typically, when the carrier sends that information to your Pbx, you don't get the full 10 digits unless you ask for it, but you might get 3, 4, 10 digits, or 7. In this case, the Pbx sees those digits. On the right-hand side where it says dialed number, that can be alphanumeric. You can put the full 800 number. You can put, especially for marketing, you might put the 800 number dash a marketing code. Maybe it's mailer 27. Maybe it's mailer 82. So this lets you hand configure how you want it presented for ECC purposes. What this gives you is great control over reporting and visibility. So if you're a heavy analytics shop, I recommend you really take a look at this. Now, in IVR, we're going to get into this. You can see the rectangle in the center. I know it's small. Let's expand that. This is how that Pbx name shows up as Deenis name. That was added in GA6. Funny story, it had been available in ECC for a long time, but it was never exposed, so we got it exposed. All right, those were just a couple of pieces that I really felt were important to show. Let's get into a live demo. Now, what I'm going to do in this demo is I'm going to do a basic call flow. Our call flow is going to have 3 menu options: customer service, tech support, and sales. However, I'm going to do some preliminary work. I'm going to set up a database connection. I'm going to set up a call profile and an Ivr application. I'm going to explain these pieces because we're actually going to use them in the call flow I build. Now, on the right-hand side, we're going to change a call profile piece of data, change a priority. I'll do a callback in queue. I'm going to do a database lookup, and I'm going to touch on 1 or 2 of the things that you can't find in the manual, and I'm specifically going to talk about Annie versus calling. So let's exit out of there. We'll come back here in just a bit. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. Clear my screen. I am going to navigate to Contact Center Director. It's a good idea to navigate and set things up. So when you're planning your IVR, put it on paper, put your flow process together, and there's always some preliminary pieces that need to be set up. So the first thing I'm going to do is, because in my call flow I'm going to use a database connection, I'm going to create a database connection. Now in the upper left-hand corner I'm going to type in database. To show you how easy it is out of the box, I simply navigate down to database connections, and then down below I have these connections already built. Now, if I want to add a new connection, simply go to the right-hand side, hit New, and down below gives me my next connection. We'll call this Demo Today, and then I can pick the connection I need: SQL, MySQL, Access, Oracle, Sybase. So there's quite a bit. Let's do SQL. Once I'm done, I'm going to put the username and password, the number of simultaneous connections. I've never seen anyone use more than 4, and that was with a very busy contact center. But you can adjust those accordingly. And then I'm on the right-hand side, I'm going to hit Create. Well, let's change this to SQL. SQL Express. Okay. Yeah, that's the one I want. Okay, SQL Express, and hit create. Now I have a brand new database connection. You can see here it's called Demo Today. Now the next piece of the database connection is I'm going to want to store information, and we store those in call profiles. Remember, call profiles are like labels. They store information, and for database purposes, I'll type in call profile and select call profile on the left. Now I already have quite a bit of call profiles configured. Account balance, account name, but just to show you, you can add anything you want. If I need a new one, let's go to the right-hand side, hit New, and down below I'm going to get the next sequential. Let's call this Customer Policy ID. Hit Create. Now I have something very specific to insurance companies and something that I can play with inside Ivr. Now the next piece I'm going to do is configure something that's rarely talked about. It's called Ivr Application. Now in this case, this is not configuring the actual application where we configure the Ivr. This is allowing me to create a widget so I can track where people press in the Ivr. So I recommend giving these logical names. Let's go to New on the right-hand side. Almost everything inside Director allows you to hit New. And here I've got New. I'm going to call this one. Let's call it CS for customer service. Let's call a new one. We'll call this one 2 for tech support. I'll just call it tech support. And then lastly, I'm going to call this one new 3 sales. Create. Okay, that is the setup. Now let's go into Ivr specifically. I'm going to navigate to GCCS, which actually stands for Graphical Call Control Scripting. And we're going to build the call flow. Now this is going to go pretty quickly. We have about another 20 minutes left, so I'm going to sort of fly through this a little bit because I want to make sure I cover some key pieces. So in the background on the left-hand side, your palette has the widgets. ShoreTel doesn't refer to them as widgets, but today I refer to everything as a widget. That's kind of a plug-in. That's what people have gotten used to, and the toolbox does a great job of that. Let's create a brand new call flow using the pieces and building the call flow as I talked about. So you hit New. Now, you can give it a name down below. I'm not going to worry about that. In the interest of time, let's just start building things out. So here's my call flow on the right-hand side. It's all drag and drop. So on the left, I'm going to give a menu. Thank you for calling. Please press 1, 2, or 3. Now, when I press 1, 2, or 3, I am going to update a call profile value, simply because I want to put the reason that the caller called in. So now I'm going to take, let's finish the rest of this out. Once I do a call profile value, I'm going to ask the client for their account number. So I'm going to get digits. And for each branch, I will get digits. So that's like the same. And then after I get the digits, I'm going to go to a database. So I'm going to do a SQL Connect. Now, as I said earlier, we've had a lot going on in a short amount of time. So if you feel like you're getting lost, please use the email I sent earlier. And then I'm going to do a SQL execute. I'm going to ask the database for some information. Let's move it through. And then lastly, I'll close the database connection. And you can see it's all drag and drop. I'm just doing 3 branches. And then I'm going to decide where to set that call, where to route that call. All right. So while there are 3 similar branches, to connect them, you just drag and drop. So let's go back to the beginning. Option 1, press 1, go here. Press 2, go here. Press 3, go here. Now once someone presses those options, here's where we're going to start having some fun. Remember the Ivr application? Over here is a widget called Ivr Application. I'm going to tell the system to turn on that trigger so that I can count how many people are pressing 1, 2, or 3. Once I do that, I'm going to get the account number information from the user. And then from there, we'll connect to a database. And then we will ask the database for information. I will disconnect from the database. And then before we route the call, we can do a logic switch. A logic switch is where I use a condition. Tell me what I got from the database and decide what I should do with that call. Now here, I'm going to use 3 just to show you logic. But logic can be several things. If I remove this one here, a third one, I might use this decision tree. And I talked about that earlier. So let's go through here. Let's connect the logic. And then from this point forward, I'm just going to connect 1 going through. And here is true. And remember, if it's false, you have to have that filled out as well. This is the one I was talking about right here. You've got to fill out a true and false statement. Now, here's how easy the flow builder is to use. Because this is greeting, thank you for calling, blah, 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 you're going to point to the prompt down below. So here's the prompt. This is where the files are stored on the server. It'll navigate me directly to my files, my recordings. I'm going to go to the English files, and I have a subdirectory on the server called custom. So I would definitely point to my specific sort of recording. I'm just going to grab any one of them just for the sake of moving to the demo. Now, when they press 1, remember my option is for customer service, press 1, for tech support, press 2, etc. Here's where the change the call profile becomes valuable. I'm going to right-click down below. You'll notice that when you select an icon, down below you always have options. In this case, I might want to do the collect the Dtmf. The customer pressed some digit, right? And I'm going to give it a value in this case. Because I have this Ivr application, I can change the value to, when they press 1, this is customer service. I've now created a label so that when the agent answers the call, they will see this label. If it's option 2, we're going to do the same thing. Change the call profile to that option, which was tech support. Now, I'm not going to configure the third one. Hopefully you're getting the idea. Now, let's go back to 1. That is customer service. That's the call profile I updated. I can do it manually. Now, the next thing, because the client pressed 1, I want the Ivr application to be triggered. Remember, we have 1 equals customer service. This will set off the reporting, which is built into ECC. I can report how many people pressed 1. So that's what this Ivr application widget is used for. Since I'm asking the individual for their account number, this next one that says get digits, right down below, the call profiles, those are what I configured. I can enter information. If I collect information, I'm going to collect here their account number. I'm going to put it in the call profile called account number. And down below, the account number has 6 digits. All right, next thing I'm going to do is connect to a database. So here's my database for today, demo today. Once I've connected a database, the next piece is a little bit more complex, but to give you an idea of some of the things that we've talked about, I'm going to point us to the database. Normally, I would say select everything from my table where account number equals %account num. And that is the call profile here. When I make the reference to it, I simply put a % sign. Now down below, you see where it says call profile and column? When I right click, I can do many things here. In the interest of time, I can go to priority. I can automatically change the call priority to something different. If they come in as 50, I can change this to 100. If I right click again, I can also go and get the account balance from the database. I can also get the account number from the database. So lots of information. Now the mapping of the column is saying, where do I find that information in your database? We might find account balance in a field called balance. Let's leave it there. The next thing I would do once I've decided where I get my data from the database is I will close my database connection. After I close my connection, here's where we have a little bit of fun. This is the evaluator. It's the logic switch. I can do things such as if the account balance, which I got from the database here, is greater than $500 or $5,000, follow what happens in 1. 1 is right here. And then that sets my destination. You can see my destination can be a service. Remember, the service is the queue, so this might be my customer service group. Hopefully that gives you kind of a quick hit. We have a few minutes left. I do want to go back to the database lookup. Here's what I want to point out. Oftentimes, instead of asking the customer for their account number, you will look for their account number based on their caller ID. So here, select everything from my table where phone 1 equals caller ID. That's what you would think, or according to ShoreTel's call profiles, would be calling. However, even though calling shows up at the desktop as the caller ID, you cannot use it in a select statement. You must use any. That is something not found in a manual. So we've changed priorities. We changed the call profile information. We did a database lookup. I'm going to stop here because I threw quite a bit at you. Are there any questions? I kind of hesitate to go into the alphanumeric. Obviously, you can see that we were ambitious today to show quite a bit of information. Are there any questions, Nick?
Yeah, so the first question, what about using Dtmf for entering account numbers with alpha characters in the account?
So in order to do, yeah, so you can do that. But in doing that, you need to set up a logical character association. So for example, what I mean by that is to get to B, you have to push 2 twice, so 2, 2. So you would need to set something up where it would look for information, and it could be a complex evaluator. So for example, you might have an option that says if you need to enter an alphanumeric, press star and then your selection. So for B it would be star 2, 2. Star for C would be star 3, 3. 2, 2, 2. So you have, there's a lot more work involved. Yes, you can do it. Maybe we should take that as a one-off. It's a lot more involved, at least at that aspect. Any other questions?
Looks like that's it for so far.
Okay, and that was a very quick answer. So I encourage you to reach out to train@inflowcommunications.com. We can talk a little bit more in detail on that. It can be done. With that in mind, let me show you. This may give you a glimpse into how that can be done. I'm going to go into a routing process that I have here that I've created. I'm going to specifically go into alphanumeric readback. Okay, now this does get a little hairy, but here's what I can do. I'm going to just go to the one at the, let's go to the one at the top. Okay, so this flow process is what I'm using at the top here. Now there's several things I use call profiles for. Number one, you see I created a call profile called loopback count because I want to count how many times I circled back. And the reason is, if I'm looking up the spelling of a first name, the first thing I need to find out is how many characters in the first name. If the guy's name is John, there's 4 characters. But what's most important is when I'm doing the loop, I want to count. I'm on character 1, I'm on character 2, I'm on character 3. So I'm using the call profile to create a bucket where I can store the character digits. Now when I go to my SQL statement, this is where it gets a little more complex, but you got to be smarter than the system. What I do is say, go find the first name, and then tell me how long the first name is, then tell me how long the last name is, and you notice it says as length name. I'm just telling you, bring that information to me as the length name. Then I get the count balance, etc. But you'll notice down below, when I map my values, I'm mapping these pieces of information to the call profile for temporary storage. The most important thing is to look at the value, find out how many characters there are, and then systematically loop through it. Go to the first letter, oh, it's J. Go to the second letter, it's O. Now here's where you can get creative. My play file says play the recording. To spell your first name, press 1. And then I go through a database query and grab the information. Now, this is where I start doing the loop back. I want to find out how many records there are, how long, how many times I've circled through the loop. This is where I do it here. It's a little more complicated. Hopefully I'm not scaring people away, but what I'm showing you is that you can do things that are not in a manual. Lastly, I'm telling the system based on the file name, how long it is, and my loop count, go grab 1 digit. So what's going to happen here is the second will be 2. Go grab the second digit, 1. And tell it to play the file equal to that digit. And so the readback here is playback wave. What I did in the loopback is said if it's an A, go find my recording of A. So what I had to do was sit down and make a recordings, 26 of them for the letters of the alphabet, A, B, C. Those are all separate files that I loaded into the directory, and now I can say go grab the information, find the match, play back the A. Here's what you need to know. Because the system is going to a directory on IVR, you do not have to put the .wave extension. And every time I play a recording and a file, such as, let's spell the name John, J, then increase my loop count to 2. Now it's saying go grab letter 2. O, go grab letter 3. H. And then this decision tree here, this decision tree does nothing more than count how many people or how many letters are in that character length. What I did was say if there's 4 characters in the name John, anytime I reach less than 4 characters, go back to the beginning and get the next character in sequence. Once it hits, hey, the number is greater than the 4 digits, then it finishes off. Would you like to read that back again, etc. This is a classic example of using call profiles to be smarter than the system so that I can record and do things not intended or out of the box. So back to the question you posed a moment ago, can I do alphanumeric input? Yes. It would require you setting up a system that can read the values based on a match. So you would have to do things like star 22, star 222, so that I know how to make a relationship. 222, star 222 means C, star 22 means B. All right. Now, admittedly, we were ambitious. There's a lot of detail in this overview today. If you have questions or you're shy about asking the questions in this forum, please send your email inquiry to training@inflowcommunications.com. I would be happy to get on a call with you and talk about your specific need and help you sort of interrelate the pieces together. The most common things that occur in IVR is folks want to know how many people press X digit. Or if I have an 800 number coming in, instead of showing the 800 number, can you show the business name associated with the 800 number? That's very common. Or can I use the customer's input and show their first name and last name? All these things are possible. I'm happy to walk you through that. Again, send your inquiry to training@inflowcommunications.com. And lastly, I'll leave you with, if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's natural. There's a lot of information here. And again, reach out to training@inflowcommunications.com. Thanks again for your time and attention. And don't forget, our next web session is May 17th. We have our sessions the 3rd Tuesday of every month, and it will be 10 a.m. Next month's topic will be on the PBX side. Thanks so much, everyone.